Learn all about living in Ensenada, Baja California Norte from expat Bob Bridge in this video interview with expats in Mexico. What is it about Ensenada that attracts expats?
Well, I have to say that the majority of expats here are folks from Southern California who have, I think, traditionally over the years come over here on vacations with their parents when they were kids or something like that. There used to be a lot of camping and little trailer parks and so on close to the seashore south of the city. And that area just started to evolve from tents and trailers to cottages and from cottages to regular homes. And a lot of these folks just decided, well, let's stay here. So you have a tremendous number of folks who have just sort of settled here as a second home and still maintain homes in California. And a lot of them that have done so have never even bothered with proper immigration procedures. They're just here. I guess you could say as illegals, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, so they're not on tourist visas?
Well, a lot of them are, of course, and a lot of them cross the border so frequently, it just becomes almost second nature, and sometimes you just forget about it, and that's it.
Are there many expats in Ensenada that are Canadians like you?
We're not sure how many. I know it's not a big number. I know of maybe half a dozen Canadians in this general area. Now, the area we live in is about 20 minutes south of Ensenada. We don't really have any acquaintances or friends of other expats in the greater Ensenada area, but down here near this sort of seashore area, there's probably a couple of thousand expats, mostly American, of course, and a handful of Canadians, Australians, Europeans.
Tell us a little bit about Ensenada. It's a fairly large city, isn't it?
When I looked at the population numbers for Ensenada some years ago, it said 450,000. So I figure it's somewhere between there and 500,000. It's a seaport city. It's very busy. It's got a harbor that has cruise ships coming and going twice a week. Lots of freighters and container ships coming in all the time, bringing goods to Mexico and taking Mexican goods overseas. It's got a very vibrant downtown area, thousands of little shops, as you can imagine, and one little section which we call the tourist area, full of really nice restaurants and souvenir shops and art shops and curio shops. Plus, it's got a very nice malecon with sort of plazas and public squares and flags and all that good stuff, and a great view of the harbor tours and so on. So it's a pretty exciting city.
What's the cost of living like there with the proximity to the U.S. only 2 hours away? Is it a little higher than the rest of Mexico, do you think?
I think it might be. It's hard to tell. We haven't lived for an extended period in any other part of Mexico. We did live for 3 months in San Felipe over at the north end of the Sea of Cortez a few years ago, and we also spent 3 months in Yucatan quite some years ago. And I don't really know if I can equate prices there with prices here, but I think we've got to be a little more costly being that close to the U.S. But being that close to the U.S. means also that you can get up there fairly quickly and pick up goods that maybe you can't find in Mexico. So there's an advantage that maybe cancels out any disadvantage. But Barbara and I have found that the cost of living here is really a big deal for us. We're on pensions, and living in Nova Scotia is probably one of the highest cost of living places in Canada.
Really?
And Canada's higher cost of living than California. So, think about it. We were paying $5 for a pound of butter, $4.50 for a half gallon of milk.
So Ensenada was quite a nice surprise.
Oh, we love it. Yeah, we love the way we pile up a surplus each month rather than a deficit, which it used to be.
Do you own your own home?
No, we're renting.
How big is your house?
It's 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, furnished, and supplied with all the water we can use, maintenance,
Trash pickup.
trash pickup. So it's pretty complete.
What do you pay on a monthly basis?
800.
What do you have in the way of square footage?
That's a good question. I think if I can just sort of look left and right here, say the dimension of the house probably 30 by 30 and 2 floors. So it's got to be 1,500 to 2,000 feet, somewhere in there, depending on if you factor in the front terrace and the back patio.
Nice. And I think you had mentioned earlier when we started chatting that you're close to the ocean.
Yes, we're the second row of houses back from the beach. So we just walk across the street basically and go between two houses on a little laneway, and we're on the sand.
Do you have a view of the ocean from your second floor?
We do, yes. We can see the surf.
For $800 a month.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, we like it.
How do you do your shopping down there? Do you shop in the local markets?
Oh, definitely. We have, of course, all the good stuff like Calamax and Soriana, these big Mexican supermarkets, and I love them. But we also have all the little stores, the little shops. In terms of imported type stuff, we have a Costco, we have a Smart and Final, we have Office Depot, that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Home Depot, all that.
Do you have Mexican health insurance, or do you visit the U.S. when you went
We
medical care?
having the Residente Permanente type of visa, we
Yes.
certainly do qualify for Mexican health care. I haven't signed up for it yet because I've got Medicare in the U.S. and the U.S. is close enough. So we whip up there for any of the more extensive requirements we might have.
Sure.
But for the odd headache or whatever, we go to a local Mexican doctor, and we certainly go to Mexican dentists and currently Mexican ophthalmologists. So we use quite a mix of both.
And they're very inexpensive compared to Southern California, for example.
Truly, truly. Like, for instance, Medicare doesn't cover dental work, so all of our dental work has been here, and it has been very economic and very high quality.
What would you pay for just a checkup and a cleaning?
$40.
Can't beat that.
Yeah, and I've had a number of things like root canals, and they've been like $300 sort of thing. So pretty happy with that.
But if someone was moving there or retiring in that area and was living on Social Security, a couple Social Security paychecks, for example, what do you think they could live on a monthly basis in terms of net dollars?
That's a good question. I never added up the number, but you've just described us in terms of those Social Security pensions.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, we're putting aside a small surplus every month. I get a couple of small pensions from Canada, and we get Social Security from the U.S. because I worked there for 20, 25 years.
Do you go out often to eat?
Not as often as we could. I like to cook, and I'm a pretty exotic kind of a cook. I picked up a lot of tastes living in Southeast Asia for a brief period and traveling the world so much that I like to do a lot of fancy cooking. So what I do is pretty good at home, so we don't go out that much. Although just the other day we went out to one of our local favorites, took a couple with us who were going off on a long trip, and we wanted them to have a nice dinner on us before they left. And it's a restaurant called Junior's Burgers.
Oh.
And it's a Mexican restaurant, but it sits on a hillside, and you can get a table with a great view of the estuary here and the sand spit that we live on and the ocean and so on. And it's a very popular local restaurant. It's not in the city. It's right out here in the Punta Banda area where we live, as is another restaurant called Sharky's, and that is a very American concept restaurant.
So it's fairly inexpensive to go out to eat.
Oh, yeah, particularly if it's right here in our sort of neighborhood south of the city. But if you go into Ensenada, you can find a very, very broad range.
Can you swim in the ocean there?
Yes, although from time to time you can't, depending on the direction of the currents and so on. There's a number of very large tuna holding pens about 2 miles offshore, actually down towards the end of the Punta Banda Peninsula. And depending on which way the currents are flowing, there can be trash or outflow from those tuna holding pens find its way to the beach. Infrequently, but every time we have guests here, they can't wait to get in the water, and 90% of the time, it's great.
Did you bring a car down there, or did you buy a car?
We came down in our pickup hauling a large trailer with all our goodies in it, and we didn't fully appreciate that if you have a vehicle, as we did, that is outside a certain window of acceptable years for import, that you can never actually legalize or nationalize by importing that vehicle, particularly when you become a residente permanente. As long as I was temporal, which I was for 5 years, it's quite legitimate to have that vehicle with that foreign plate. But somewhere in there, we got to thinking, we need a car that we can import and have Mexican plates, Mexican registration, Mexican taxes. It just would feel better. And we'll just keep the pickup for camping or whatever. And sure enough, we did put a camper on it, and that's what we do with it. But only because Baja is considered to be the, quote, border zone, unquote, is it possible to continue driving with the foreign plate even after you become residente permanente. But if you try to take it to the so-called Mexican mainland, you could be in trouble. The foreign plate driven by a residente permanente visa with the driver is subject to confiscation. Not that I know it ever happens, but it is the law.
What are the three things you love most about living in Ensenada?
Well, as we've already discussed, the cost of living is so attractive and is so comfortable, not to have any of those financial worries. It's really great. Second is the weather. I like it to be a little warmer in the winter months. I like to have to light up the little propane heater in the living room less frequently, but it always warms up later in the day. And the 5 or 6 months of the warmer weather months are just great. So the weather would be obviously the second thing. Compared to Nova Scotia, it's paradise. It's totally balmy.
I can understand that.
Yeah, really. The third thing, hard to say, just being in Mexico. We do love the Mexican people. Barbara, for instance, spends every Saturday morning up in the hills, the other side of town here, teaching classes to Mexican children. So Barbara and a number of other women and a couple of guys volunteer their time and their money every Saturday morning, and have been doing this for about 5 years, to go up to the mountain, and they operate a school. And what this school is to familiarize these children with what I would call the real world.
Well, it sounds like Barbara has a very good command of the Spanish language. And how about you?
Well, my Spanish isn't all that bad. In terms of reading or expressing my needs, but I'll tell you, listening to locals they speak too fast, too much local dialect, too much accent, too much slang. So I'm not a good listener, but I'm a great reader, and I can talk a little bit. Barbara deals primarily with English with these kids, and she does introduce some Spanish when she's teaching numbers and letters and pictures and animals and stuff. So she's learning Spanish as they learn English. Let me put it that way. It's kind of neat.
And I'm assuming that because you're so close to San Diego, that there are quite a few people in the Ensenada area, the Mexican people who speak English.
Yes, I would say that's true. It's very easy to find doctors and dentists and shopkeepers and so on who definitely can handle English. Not always a lot, but enough.
Well, Bob, it's been delightful speaking with you today. It sounds like you're a very contented, happy family there.
Yeah, we are.